Hey Mr. Malloy, it's Mackenzie Bowman, and this is my project on why I believe that Rosa Parks is one of the most influential people in US history. Throughout everyone's lives, everyone experiences some sort of hardship. If you haven't, then a loved one has. But some people aren't lucky and they go through a lot more hardship than the average person does in their lifetime. Rosa Parks is a name that comes to mind when I think of hardship, but another word that comes to mind that I associate with her is perseverance. When she was only 2 years old, her parents split and her mother moved her family to Pine Level, Alabama to live with her parents, as stated on biography.com. Rosa's grandparents were both former slaves themselves and were both strong advocates for equal rights for all races. So even from childhood, she was surrounded with racial activists her whole life. Since Parks' mother was a teacher, you would assume she would have good education, but sadly she did not, as she was in and out of different segregated schools and she eventually did drop out. This was mostly due to her terminally ill grandmother and her sick mom. So she quit school, got a job, and helped take care of them as they had for her whole life. Years later, she met her soon-to-be husband, Raymond Parks, who was a member of the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which she later joined and worked closely alongside E.D. Nixon, who was a well-known activist. So as you can see, she surrounded herself with good people that stood for what she stood for and furthered her beliefs. So on December 1st, 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, when bus driver James Blake asked her to give up her seat to a white passenger, she took a stand against racial injustice and refused to give her seat to a man just because of the color of his skin. This shocked many people in America, as it should, because it was very rare that a black person would stand up to a white person just due to the social standards at that time. But she put fear aside and did what others were not willing to do. With this action came consequences, sadly, which included her going to jail, but it also marked the beginning of a movement that would change the course of history forever. The day of Parks' trial, it was asked that all members of the African American community stay off public transportation in Montgomery as an act of protest, and they did just that. What started as such a little protest turned into a 380-day-long boycott, according to History.com, which ended successfully with the Supreme Court declaring that segregation on public transportation was wrong. The Montgomery bus boycott showed that no matter what your stature is in society, no matter how important you think you are, you can make a difference. And she preached in her speeches that it's not a matter of black and white, it's a matter of wrong and right, using that to further her idea of equality rather than putting one race above another and putting one race down. This gave her the title Mother of the Civil Rights Movement, and of which she worked closely with the father of the Civil Rights Movement, being Martin Luther King Jr. These two combined to make peaceful protest by using King's Christian outlook and combating violence with love. And racial injustice, it's been a continuing issue for a long time now, and it's still an issue today. But because of people like Rosa Parks, we've gotten so much closer to equality for all races. Schools are no longer segregated. Buses now allow all people to ride on them. You don't have to give up your seat for someone else just because of the color of their skin. And I believe that Rosa Parks played a huge role in that. This is important to society now because in the world we have today, because just imagine if she hadn't given up her seat that day. Who else would have stepped up and done that act of fearlessness? And how long would it have taken for them to do that act? I'm not saying she solved racism, as that's more of a group effort rather than a single person. A single person can't solve racism. But I believe that with her and Martin Luther King Jr.'s work, they combined to create a beautiful movement, even though it got ugly, sadly, at times. I believe that they combined to create a movement that changed history, of course. Personally, I could not imagine what life would be like if Rosa Parks had not made that fearless act on December 1st, 1955, which brings me back to my point that not only has she gone through hardships, but she has persevered through them and made a huge impact on the world we have today. Okay, thank you. Have a good and safe quarantine.